night Aarya first saw the vision, she believed it to be nothing more than a strange dream, an overactive imagination responding to exhaustion, loneliness, and the quiet tension that had settled over her life ever since she accepted a research assignment in the abandoned hill town of Dharava, a place once populated, but now left to crumble after a mysterious mass migration decades ago. The dream had felt too real. She was standing in a narrow stone corridor, her breath echoing sharply, her heartbeat pounding in her ears, and ahead of her was a tall iron door with a symbol she could not recognize, a circle with 4 slashed lines cutting through it. The moment she touched the door, her hand burned as though the metal were scorching hot, and she woke up gasping, clutching her palm, shocked to see a faint red mark exactly where the symbol had appeared. She tried shaking it off, convincing herself it was merely stress, but the mark remained. As she walked through the silent town the next morning, mapping the ruins for her university project, she noticed something else. Whenever she blinked, even for an instant, she saw flashes of that same corridor, as if her mind were forcing her to remember something she had never actually experienced. The air felt heavier, the wind colder, the stones beneath her feet warmer than they should have been. She kept telling herself to focus, yet a whispering sound followed her everywhere. By afternoon, she discovered an old house surrounded by overgrown vines and broken pillars. The wooden door creaked open without her touching it. Inside, there was nothing but dust and piles of forgotten belongings, an old lantern, a torn shawl, a rusted trunk, and walls covered in faded drawings. But the strange thing was the symbol, the same circle with slashes, painted repeatedly across the walls, almost violently, like warnings. Each time she looked at them, her head throbbed. When she turned to leave, the door slammed shut on its own. She flicked on her flashlight and felt her breath freeze as she realized she was no longer alone. There was someone standing at the far end of the hall, tall, thin, dressed in gray, face completely hidden in shadow. She stepped back, but he did not move. Then he lifted his hand slowly and pointed at her, and the moment he did, her vision blurred and she saw the corridor again, the same iron door, the same burning symbol. But this time the door was slightly open, and a faint red glow leaked through the crack. When she blinked again, the figure in gray had disappeared. Terrified, she pushed the door open and ran out into the street, but the air outside felt wrong, thicker, almost liquid, like the world was warping. She stumbled back to her temporary lodging where her colleague and friend, Ryan, waited. When she told him everything, he laughed nervously at first, thinking she was exaggerating, but when he saw the mark on her hand, he grew pale. "That's the seal of Dharava," he whispered. "Locals who left the town long ago say it appears to anyone who has been chosen." "Chosen for what?" she asked. He shook his head. "For the final vision. They say once the mark appears you start seeing things, and if you reach the last vision, you never come back." Aarya felt her stomach tighten. She wanted to leave, pack her bags, forget the assignment, but something inside her insisted she had already crossed a point of no return. That night the dreams came more violently. She found herself in the corridor once again, only this time she was not alone. There were people standing along the walls, villagers, dressed in old clothes, eyes blank, expressions frozen in fear. Their mouths opened and closed silently, as if trying to scream, but unable to produce sound. She ran past them toward the iron door, but before she could touch it, the floor cracked open beneath her, and she plummeted into a dark pit filled with hundreds of hands reaching out, trying to pull her in. She woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, her heart racing. Ryan rushed into her room. Before she could speak, he said he had experienced something too. A man in gray had stood outside his window just minutes earlier, staring directly at him, not moving, not blinking. The fear in his voice told Aarya this was no longer something she could dismiss. They decided to leave immediately, but the moment they stepped out of the house, the sky darkened unnaturally, and a thick fog curled around their feet. The streets twisted into unfamiliar paths, and the houses no longer appeared as they had before. The entire town looked rearranged, as though something was shifting the land itself to trap them. Ryan cursed under his breath, trying to guide them down the road that led out of Dharava, but every turn brought them back to the same place, the abandoned house with the painted symbols. This time the front door was already open. Aarya felt an invisible force pulling her inside, and though Ryan tried stopping her, she felt compelled beyond reason. The air smelt of old ashes. The walls were no longer dusty. They were breathing, expanding, and contracting like living skin. The corridor inside elongated into infinity, and within seconds they were back in the same corridor from her visions. The stone walls, the eerie silence, the iron door ahead. Only now it was real. Rian panicked, shouting that they needed to run, but the moment he turned, the path behind them vanished, replaced by a solid stone wall. With no choice left, they walked toward the door. Every step triggered a sound, a faint whisper from the walls, a distant rumble from the ground, and the quiet vibration of the door as though something behind it waited impatiently. Suddenly, Rian gasped and grabbed her arm. Aarya looked up and saw him staring at the villagers she had seen in her dream. They were real, standing in the corridor, motionless, still trying to scream. Their eyes shifted toward Aarya and Rian in unison. Then the corridor began to pulse with red light. The villagers turned and pointed at the door, beckoning silently, their faces contorted in agony. When Aarya looked at Rian, he nodded. They had no escape. She placed her hand on the burning symbol etched into the iron. It stung sharply, but she pushed. The door creaked open, releasing a blast of cold wind that extinguished their flashlight. Only the red glow remained, and within it stood the tall man in gray, face still hidden, though now she could see faint outlines of hollow eye sockets beneath the shadow. He stepped forward. His voice, when it finally emerged, was distorted and layered, as though dozens of people were speaking through him at once. "You have been chosen," he said. "Chosen to see the truth." Aarya felt her body lock in place. Rian tried to pull her away, but he couldn't move either. The man touched her forehead with one long, cold finger, and everything vanished. Aarya found herself floating in a space beyond reality, a void filled with swirling red energy and echoes of distant screams. Images flashed before her. Dharava thriving long ago, the villagers discovering a hidden chamber beneath the town, a strange relic emitting an energy that warped their minds. The visions showed the relic opening a doorway between their world and another, allowing something ancient, something hungry, to slip through, a being that fed on sight, memory, and consciousness. The villagers tried to seal it away, creating the symbol to lock the doorway. But sealing it required sacrifice. Someone had to witness the final vision and tether the entity away from the living world. One villager had done it centuries ago, but the seal needed renewing every generation. Now it was Aarya's turn. She screamed that she didn't want this, that she never agreed, but the visions continued, overwhelming her, forcing her to watch the relic's corruption consume everyone who resisted. When the visions released her, she collapsed on the cold stone floor. The man in gray stood over her. "You are the seer," he said. "Your final vision will decide this world's fate." Rian shouted that they needed to run, but the corridor had already started melting, the walls dripping like hot wax. The villagers' silent screams grew louder even without sound. Aarya knew what she had to do, though fear gripped her entire being. She stepped toward the center of the room behind the iron door, where the relic floated, an orb of shifting red smoke. It called to her, pulsing rhythmically, matching her heartbeat. She reached out. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, a massive shock surged through her, and the world shattered into 1,000 glowing fragments. She saw everything, the past, the future, the entity's hunger, the seal weakening. She understood now that the final vision was not about seeing death. It was about holding back the darkness by witnessing it fully. The relic fused with her mark, burning into her skin, embedding itself in her mind. She screamed, but she did not let go. Slowly the corridor began to harden again. The villagers' faces softened, their silent screams faded, and the man in gray bowed his head. When the vision ended, she collapsed into Rian's arms. The relic vanished. The door closed. The town shifted back to normal. When Aarya opened her eyes, they were outside, back in daylight, the air crisp, the fog gone. Dharava looked ordinary again. But Aarya felt different. Her eyes ached. Every shadow seemed to move slightly when she wasn't looking. Rian asked what she saw in the final vision, but she only shook her head. Some truths were too heavy to speak. They left Dharava without looking back. But that night, as Aarya tried to sleep miles away from the cursed town, she felt something. Someone, whispering inside her mind. She stared into the darkness, and for an instant, she saw the corridor again, the iron door, and the faint red glow. And she understood with a sinking heart. The final vision was not over. It had only just begun.